Through Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism, the weekly show. Great to have you back. I hope you and yours are well. A couple of wee adverts there at the beginning for, of course, the All Under One Banner March in Ayr on the 29th of July. Hope to see so many of you there. I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited to go there and go down to Ayr and see you all. And, of course, the qualities, which I'm sure our Eva and Yvonne will talk about today. But it's the summer holidays. Holyrood's closed, but Westminster's still open, and oh boy, are they having some fun down there. Lots to talk about. Let's get talking. Keep your comments coming, keep your suggestions coming, and remember, get your questions in. There've been no questions for a couple of weeks. You don't love us anymore. Get them in. We need all the topics we can get at this time of the year. So, without further ado, let's bring in the gang. Over there in Edinburgh, he's our man from STV. We poached him from there for massive money. Well, not really. 2 ginger bottles and a jam jar. We've got our Lloyd. Quinnan, Mr. Quinnan, how are you?
Very well, Roddy. Glad to be back.
Always a pleasure to see you. It is never a chore. I'm looking forward to this week. And, of course, then we've got down there in the borders, the wonderful Dr. Yvonne Ridley. Yvonne, my darling friend, how are you?
I'm great. And
yes, you are. You are great.
Well, I'm riding high at the moment after winning a parking ticket complaint against Edinburgh City Council. So you've just reminded me of it by mentioning Edinburgh.
Edinburgh, great. The greatest thing about Edinburgh is the M8 to Glasgow. That's what I say. Anyway, and of course up in Clackmannanshire, our favourite county, our favourite lawyer, the wonderful Eva Comrie. My friend, how are you?
Great stuff, Roddy. Really looking forward to concluding an employment contract with Yvonne, because I'm taking her on next week as a legal consultant, giving her 100% record in Scottish courts thus far.
Oh, dear goodness gracious. The Lord Advocate can be replaced from one of the Prism's favourites. And of course, we mustn't forget the old Coatbridge Cavalier over there in North Dakota. Yeah.
Aye, except I'm in the Côte de Bridge.
You're in the Côte de Bridge.
The wonderful Côte de Bridge, twinned with the Côte d'Azur for obvious reasons, as I keep saying. But I'm back in Scotland, about to do a tour of the Western Isles, which I can't wait for. It's going to be brilliant. Up to Ullapool, over to Hallows, Harris, Eust, down to Barra, over the Skye, down the west coast. It'll be brilliant. Can't wait. Buzzing.
You've been in America too long. You're losing your accent, mate. You're sounding more American every week.
Aye, your fanny. Apparently your fanny over there is your ass.
Yes, you got fanny bags. I remember the first time over there, saying, you got a fanny bag? Like, what?
Fanny pack? You call them a fanny. It didn't. First time it didn't get
Are you seeing anyone special when you're over in the Hebrides?
Well, as it turns out, I'm taking the girlfriend who's come over from America, and we're going on the Raz with Angus Brendan McNeil, of all fellows. So that'll be good.
So that's the language we're asking for him, and we expect to see him on the Prism show quick enough. Which actually it's a very good segue, because Angus is taking sort of prime this week. His resignation, or not his resignation, but his decision, Phil, not to rejoin the group. And he was very critical of the party, telling them he's not going to go back to the party till he's convinced that they are getting their Independence Act together. A brave move by Angus. We know what happens to people that go against the parties, any party, not just the SNP. So a brave move, but it shows a man of principle.
It certainly does. And when I first arrived, he was one of the guys who got on instantly. I'm involved in a lot of adversarial management techniques and strategy and people watching and people playing. And I saw Angus as as an operator. He's a smart guy. He comes over as very affable, friendly, but he's a thinker and he's a strategist as well. And there's no accident that he's close to the core principles of the SNP. Was always advocating them, stood up against it, to be honest, before anyone else did. What people don't realise, this is also a job for people. For all the fact that there was a bunch of us went in there and we were making more money doing something else. Me, obviously, in oil and gas, and Philippa Whitford, Joanna Cherry, and the like. They're all making more money in our own jobs. And what we did in politics was all about the principle and the cause. And Angus, but for most of us, you still got a family, you've still got a mortgage to pay. You know, people forget this is human beings in the goldfish bowl being preyed upon by the establishment, sniped at by the press. We say that all the time. So what I saw with Angus was a smart man of principle who's been through a lot. You know, his divorce was difficult, but he's a cracking guy, absolutely brilliant guy, and he's genuine a guy you would find hard to meet in politics. So it's no surprise to me that the strategy adopted there, he wants to mend the SNPs, giving the SNP a chance to get their shit together, because it is clearly not in a good way. And to be able to say that, having been forced out by people who should know better, there's a lot of still decent people that are in the SNP, but they're acting for and on behalf of those who are currently deconstructing the independence movement from within the SNP. Now, you can, if you genuinely believe in independence, like I know a lot of these people do, then why are you acting out the destruction and the infighting? Why are you promoting the infighting? Why are you critiquing Alex and the Alba Party? Why are you why are you fighting our own? Why are we prosecuting and persecuting our own? This is doing the work of Perfidious Albion for them, and it's got to stop. And this is why we've got to get rid of these clowns. We've got to get rid of Hamza and all these people that are doing this. And you line everybody up and you say, this is it. This is our party. You'll do what you want, or you're off-ski. You're out, because there's plenty of people there who could do this job. But there's another thing. Everybody on this show, and most of the people we've had on this show, could do a job in politics. You don't need to be a genius. For most people in politics, you follow orders. That's how it normally works. So for me, there's this idea, feed the edge. You go down there, it's all about me. I'm the big guy. I'm a celebrity. How the hell? You're there to do a job and you don't forget it. And that's the problem. Too many of them have forgotten. They get carried away with the TV presentations and the press attention and the somewhat, a wee bit of adulation, a wee bit of power. It's a delusion, because unless you're in power and in control of your own destiny, you have no power. It's an illusion. Unless you can change the law and change the status of your society, your culture, your education, your principles, you're wasting your time. It's just jazz hands. So to hell with all of those people that have not got their act together and are not following the will of the Scottish people. Your days are numbered.
You're absolutely. People from the Western Isles actually have got great. And you'll remember this one, Lloyd. There was Donald Stewart. And for the younger people who are watching this show, there was a time when in the UK, because there was in such a before oil, where you couldn't take more than 50 quid out of the country. And Donald Stewart from the Western Isles, of course, was our MP. At the time, I think he was the only MP we had, or maybe one of a couple. And he got up and asked a question, that wonderful Western Isles type accent. And he asked the Chancellor of the Exchequer, if I arrive at Glasgow Airport with a suitcase full of Scottish £50 banknotes, can I leave the country? And there was absolute panic and mayhem on the government benches. And I can't remember the ins and outs. Maybe one of our viewers will come out, but they changed the law quickly because, of course, Scottish wasn't legal tender. But Donald had pointed out that he wanted them to make Scottish tender legal. Otherwise, he was going to leave Glasgow Airport with a suitcase full of £50 notes. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that we're missing. And Angus Brendan is part of that sort of, to hell with, convention. He will attack it. He's been very brave, Lloyd.
There's no question about it. I think he remembers another quote from Donny Stewart, which was, "We're a revolutionary party, but we use democratic means," which, coming from him, was an astonishing thing to hear. But I think Angus Brendan certainly understands that. I just find this desperately, desperately sad. There's no question about it that Angus Brendan has great talent, great ability, but more importantly than that, an absolute commitment to the improvement of the lives of the people of this country by means of independence, as he understands, as we all do. That is the only way we can deliver and deal with the lack of distribution of funds, the lack of opportunity, the lack of choice that the majority of our people have. But I also find it interesting that first time I heard him speak publicly was back in, I think it was 1997 in the Moyer Hall at National Council, the year before the referendum on the Scottish Parliament. And after he got down from the podium, Winnie was standing just in front of me, and she turned and she said to me, "Well, Lloyd, that's one for the future, don't you think?" And she was absolutely right. But what crystallised it and what made it absolutely plain was when Angus Brendan was first elected, the number of attempts to smear his name, the number of times that you heard from particularly people in headquarters and things like that, that there was something up with Angus. It's always the way it starts. It's the way it started with him. I think what he's done this week is he's made it clear to all of us that if you support independence, if you believe that independence is the means by which we deal with all the social ills of our country, there would appear to be no place for you in Humza Yousaf's Scottish National Party.
It's so sad to hear that. Eva, one of the things that we've talked about here week in, week out, and we've already quoted Winnie once. We're now about to quote her again, but her famous "You're down to settle up, not to settle in." And it's one of the things that Angus made clear was that too many of his colleagues down there have been settling in. As we've been talking about here in this show, they're settling in, they're not settling up.
I think the great tragedy of these recent events is that Angus Brendan McNeill is probably about to have his Jimmy Reid moment. Remember, Jimmy said, the Labour Party, I didn't leave the Labour Party left me. And I think with great sadness and great regret that is what Angus is going to say. The SNP left him. I'm looking here as a former member of the SNP with half a dozen old membership cards scattered around me. I've got here an agenda from the conference of 2014, and I know some of the resolutions and the motions there, like the back of my hand. But the aims of the constitution of the SNP, the aims of the party shall be A, independence for Scotland. That is the restoration of Scottish national sovereignty and of full powers to a Scottish Parliament, whose authority will be limited only by the sovereign power of the Scottish people, to be bound with a written constitution and by such agreements as it may freely enter into, and B, the furtherance of all Scottish interests. So what has happened to Angus Brendan McNeill in the past couple of weeks is that he's been suspended and he's been chastised and he's been vilified because he's been too SNP. He's been too dedicated to Scotland. He's been too determined throughout his career, and especially now, to do the very best he can do for his country. The problem isn't Angus. There's nothing wrong with Angus Brendan McNeill, but there is something very seriously wrong at the heart of a party that can look at a couple of decades of dedication by that man of his life towards his party, his country and this movement, and say that he deserves to be suspended. He deserves a medal for standing up, for growing the spine, the very spine that Winnie Ewing had and so very few after her have portrayed. So Angus, good luck to you. You're going to need it.
Indeed he is, and hopefully, as I say, we'll have Angus on here soon again. He's not been on for a while. We had him on a few times. He's always proves a very popular guest. Yvonne, I noticed today, I don't know if you saw it, he was being attacked by James Dornan, that man from Cathcart, the MSP, who said, because Angus turned around and said, well, till you come back to independence. So James Dornan, one of his so-called colleagues, one of his fellow members, wants him thrown out the party completely and forever. Have these guys forgotten what we're all about?
You know, I described James Dornan as a very modest little man with much to be modest about. And he just needs to keep it shut. I don't know Brendan. I feel as though I know him. And I think he reminds me of a young Alex Salmond. You know, he's as straight as an arrow in his direction of where he wants to go, which is independence. When he walked into Westminster, he was talking about independence. When he stands up on a Wednesday during PMQ, he's talking about independence. And I am sure that the Islanders will really rally behind him and support him. And I think that they'll punish the SNP. And, you know, I really can't wait for the next elections that are in Holyrood and Westminster, because I think a lot of chickens will come home to roost when those elections are. We got a tiny little quake down in East London today, where a Labour stronghold, the Labour Party under Keir Starmer is acting very much like the SNP. Everybody has to toe the line. Everybody has to lean this way or lean that way, otherwise they're expelled. And Labour has tried to wade in East London and do the same down there. And there's a little ward called the Boleyn ward, which, as in Anne Boleyn, which is one of the most diverse, poverty-stricken areas in London. And Labour sacked one of the Corbynistas, who was a councillor. He stood as an independent, like Brendan is going to do. He stood as an independent, and from a point of zero, he got 42% of the vote. The Tory vote and the Green vote to a certain extent, and Labour's vote just collapsed. And this shows what can happen when people power takes over. And I really hope those islanders in his constituency, which I can't pronounce, I really hope though everybody gets behind him, because what he's done is incredibly brave. It's very inspirational. And I would say to the SNP, wake up, you're losing your rising star. You're hanging on to Mary Black, Princess Mary, who's had 2 good days in Parliament. One when she made her maiden speech, which we just heard last week from Phil, was written by 2 old guys from the SNP. And that other one was a brilliant knockdown joke at Oliver Dowden's expense. So there's our 2 good days in Parliament out of 8 years. And I've just been reading this Spiked online. They've done a real assassination job on her. And they said that she admitted she was tired of sitting in surgeries. Well, my God, that is the bread and butter of MPs. You know, that is when I often say it, you know, that the politicians are the servants, not the masters. And there she is, Princess Mary, you know, the working class hero who battered a few chips for a few weeks, turning round saying, oh, I can't be bothered with surgeries. I'm tired of sitting in surgeries. Well, poor her. You know, I mean, that it's unbelievable that somebody is going to turn round and say that. And it breaks my heart, because it would be an honour to stand for any of the people in Scotland to try and get them a better deal than the SH1T deal that they've got at the moment. And so for him to come out and do what he's done, he's a hero, and I hope that his voters respect what he's done and rally round and support him, and give the SNP a big shock at the polls.
Now, he is talking, Phil. There has been talking, Angus has said it himself, that he will definitely be standing, whether as an independent, supporting independence, or the SNP if they get their act together. Again, brave decision. It's not easy standing as an independent for sure, but he's willing to do that because he believes, because a thing called principles. And there's not enough principles and enough people in Westminster or Holyrood or any local authority. But he's one of the few.
Yes, absolutely correct. And we talked about, Yvonne was talking about Eva about Dornan earlier on. That man is an odious little scrote, if ever there was one. And I have absolutely no time for people like that, especially in some of the stuff he was involved in, that maybe I should be very careful about what I say. Yeah, so I won't say it live. But anyway, there's the principles that Angus is following, and bear in mind, he says at least until October, he will keep his distance to allow the Scottish people, and principally the SNP members, to correct their party, our party, as it was. We now have the opportunity to get this message that has been trumpeted loudly and clearly by many. And Wings critiqued it right at the start and were to get held for it, and became a pariah of the independence. But how the hell can Wings Over Scotland be a pariah of the independence movement? That's what the man's principles are. That's what he's about. What the pariahs, the parasites, are those who feed off the Union, who feed off the people of Scotland, who line their own coffers, who line their own troughs, and who are in it for themselves and don't stand up for principle. No, so to hell with anybody. Because the time has come, we've talked about it a lot of time, that classic dichotomy between, well, my loyalty through the party versus my principles. Bear in mind the founding principle, and we've said it so many times, we all know it, it's independence for the people of Scotland. Nothing less, nothing else. It's the people and the country. We need our people to be free, and if you're in it for any other reason and you're not pursuing that principle first and foremost, the SNP should not be demanding or asking for a vote with that delusion ongoing. You need to put your house in order, SNP. Either come clean and tell us you're a devolutionist party now under Humza Yousaf and these chancers, these cheats, these betrayers, or you go back online and you reject everything and clean out these Aegean stables. You know, this is a lot of shit that needs to be moved. Substantial volumes of it and substantial numbers of people, and they have to go. You really, really need to major surgery to fix what is rotten in this particular state. So no, for me, Angus is sending a very clear, it's a crystal clear message. He said it in his announcement that was televised, that there's been something wrong for a number of years, and we know it since Nicola took over, that we have lost our way. The SNP, it's not just lost our way, we have chosen the well-trodden path of doffing the cap instead of fighting the battles for Scottish independence for a people. They have chosen to do this. Nicola chose to do this. You betrayed us, Nicola. You got what you deserve. Not quite yet. Hopefully there's more to come. And there's plenty more out there who really need to get their comeuppance. And I will not shed one tear for those who get torn down because you deserve it for what you've done. And Humza, I don't think there's any... I will not forgive this man. because he's doing what Nicola's done, and I won't forgive Nicola. So no, all more power to people like Angus Brendan and anyone else. We plead with you. If this is now the time. We talked about that dichotomy. When is the time where you balance loyalty with the party and changing from within with standing up for principle? My argument, and we've been saying it for some time, I think it's crystal clear now that Angus has come out here, and the state of the vote and the deterioration of the SNP vote contrasted with the independence vote, and that gap that is widening, mind the gap. People in SNP, if you have that principle, now is the time to stand up for it. Now is the time to fix the party or walk.
Phil is absolutely right, Lloyd. I mean, you're still an active SNP member or in the party, certainly, and you have been for decades. Do you get the feeling that the party will come to the conclusion that they need to get back on track? Or do you think it's too far gone?
My head says it's too far gone. My heart hopes that we can salvage something. There are, as Phil has said continually, we've all said continually, there are very, very good people in the SNP, but there are also, there's a big payroll vote, there's a loyalty that's been built up by particular elected individuals who tend not to be of the pro-independence kind of mind. And they've hobbled the internal communication of the party. I mean, Angus Robertson's whole plan to turn the membership into a supporter membership that only comes on stream when you need them to deliver leaflets or when you need them to give them money, but they have no input and policy. This is ultimately the end, how that ends up. You know, there's an American model that you know, it's failed America and it's going to fail us. But it suits certain people, but you know, specifically on Angus Brendan, who in the Scottish government spoke to Angus Brendan about the highly protected marine areas? You know, an absolutely crucial and vital part of the remaining industry of the Western Isles. Who spoke to Angus Brendan properly about the ferries? You know, this is a seat that we held, you know, at a time that was not good for the SNP in the 70s. We held it through Donny Stewart. We lost it to the Labour Party after 79, you know, later after 79. They abandoned the Labour Party and they came to us. I'd like to ask a question of Alistair Allen. Alistair Allen is the member of the Scottish Parliament for the Western Isles. What's his relationship with Brendan? Do they have a relationship? Why don't they have a relationship? Why wasn't he, Alistair Allen, standing up for the people of the Western Isles over the highly protected marine areas, the decade-long farce that is the provision of transport and maritime infrastructure in our Western Isles? I think there's more to this than meets the eye, and it's about the removal of anyone who stands up on their hind legs and says, no, first principles, independence, first principle, first and only principle. I've seen it happen to many people over the years. Slowly but surely, they're undermined by chit-chat. Callum Miller, who, had he remained in the party, would be a contemporary of Angus Brendan's. And I spoke earlier about people who spoke at that famous National Council in the Moyer Hall. Callum Miller was also one of them. And Callum Miller was a talent, a real talent for this party, who was marginalised and removed. And I begin to think now, after my near 50 years in the party, this has happened to so many people over a period of time. And there's only one name keeps coming back to me all the time, who was an agent of influence, for want of a better description, who began some of this manipulation, some of this vile chit-chat that has cursed the careers of so many people in the Scottish National Party. And that's Michael Russell.
I knew you were going to say that. Well, you're there.
True, Phil.
But while you're on Michael Russell, because that is one of the questions I've got, and I wanted to put it to you actually, before I'm going to change the subject when I go to Yvonne, but to you. Mike Russell last week got absolutely schooled on the EU and EFTA. he was talking there about, oh yeah, EFTA's no good and we'll just go straight back into the EU. I mean, my cat is 19 years old and it knows that you cannot go into the EU, Lloyd, if you're using someone else's currency. You cannot go straight back into the EU. You have to go, there's a waiting period to get, and we know that there's a 3-month waiting period to get into EFTA. But there's Mike Russell, the president of the party, a man who's been in the party for as long as probably you and I. Well, I was. I keep forgetting I'm not there anymore. Who doesn't actually understand the EU, but is spouting out, oh, we'll just go into the EU. You know, I mean, it's just nonsense. I mean, this guy, mental.
He's a bad actor. This man is a bad actor, and we're all in his play. That's the reality of it. That's my experience of Michael Russell for 30 years. Now, he may well have a reputation amongst the press, but I say again, show me a policy. You know, he's written a nice book about a German photographer, but show me a policy. The only policy he ever wrote down was about how we needed to extend private schools into the public school sector. That was his policy, which he got shot down for.
Didn't he also believe in privatising the National Health Service?
Oh yes. But I mean, you know, what puts those ideas together? They're very American in their ideas. Michael is very American, and people will know what I mean by that. But the simple, straightforward fact of the matter here is, independence in Europe is a slogan. It has become a slogan. And I'll tell you this, it's very interesting. The original document, as written by Jim Sillars with the able assistance of Andy Brophy back in 1987-88, made very clear that the position of being independence in Europe was when the European Union was a 12-member organisation, a 12-state member. The final paragraphs of that document are, if there is the extension that is proposed to the European Union, Scotland joining that European Union would simply be a slogan. Right? Jim said that in 1988. Now, this is a slogan that they're all hanging on to because a lot of their middle-class pals and the Tommy Shepherds of this world who have, you know, gatherings and marches for Scotland and Europe where barely anybody turns up. This is a cover. It's an absolute cover. Any of them, they're not stupid. They're not stupid. They know the stuff. But Mike has to maintain, this is the line. This is the line. They've been selling it to the membership, and then that expanded membership that came in after Brexit. It's a slogan. It means nothing. There's no intellectual rigour behind it whatsoever. This European Union is not the European Union that we, the Scottish National Party, sought to join in the late 80s and early 90s. It is a completely different beast. EFTA bears far, far more resemblance to that 12-member European Union that we wanted to join for good reasons. EFTA is the only opportunity that we have to get all the benefits that are currently available for the European Union, but you don't have to sign up for their wars. And I want to know, why is it we appear to have no one in the leadership of the Scottish National Party who understands that ultimately true governance is about making decisions about going to war, to killing your own people or killing somebody else's people. These people are not serious. That's why they like slogans. And independence in Europe is a slogan that has had its day. Correct.
I am, as everyone knows, I'm an anti-war person. And at the moment, the EU, their peace fund, is being used to buy weapons for the regime. And I use the word the regime in Kiev. How can a peace fund buying weapons work? Anyway, moving on. Yvonne, with your connections to the Labour Party from years gone by, there was going back to Joanna Lamont, who famously talked about the branch office, the Labour Party being the branch office in Scotland. I needed to come out this week from our man, your favourite politician, Mr. Sir Keir Starmer, suggesting that from now on, Scottish Labour and Welsh Labour were no longer allowed to form policy, that it would all come centrally from London, and it would, so they were all talking off the same hymn sheet. So in other words, they are doing away with devolution, going back to centralisation and London policies to fit Wales, to fit Scotland. The policies in Scotland don't fit Wales, and the policies in Wales don't fit Scotland or north of England or whatever. But Labour have decided to go back the way and roll back devolution, and only policies that suit London have to be. And yet people in Scotland are going to vote Labour? Really?
Well, I think Anna Sawa has a huge problem looming, and surely to God he must realise that by now. And the same with Humza Yousaf. You know, those two, they're still pally, they're still mates. They need to sit down in a room together and start exchanging notes, because they're both being used as puppets. Humza by the Sturgeon Praetorian Guard, which is still very much in place, and Anna Sawa by Keir Starmer. Those two are being set up as patsies, and they just can't see it. I mean, the good news is Joanne Lamont is still in Holyrood at the moment, and I'm quite a fan of hers, actually. She says what she means, and she means what she says, and she couldn't give a stuff about the court of popular opinion, which is why she was slung out, I guess. But you know, she from her own bitter experience, she knows what she's talking about. But I just wish that ordinary people, ordinary voters, ordinary members of the SNP and the Labour Party would wake up and realise what is going on around them. They did in this little Berlin ward in East London, and my God, they punished Labour, which has actually withdrawn the Labour whip in East London. The whole branches down there are being run apparently by the regional office. It's quite astonishing what is going on in Labour, but it's not making the news. So the guy who's won is a Corbynista, and I didn't see Jeremy at the Durham weekend, as I promised I would, but I said to him the last time I saw him, for God's sake, stand as the London mayor. Show them who you are, and he would win. He has huge support among the young people in London, and you know, he's still a hugely charismatic figure. But unfortunately, Starmer, who is Tory light, not
so light.
Well, I mean, he's showing his colours now. But the ordinary members, you know, I don't know if you can remember, but well, you're old enough to remember, but you're old enough to forget.
Thanks very much. That's right. Wee bit ages and throw it in. There you go.
But we're old enough to forget this as well. There was a Japanese soldier called Hiru Onoda, who
I'm saying World War soldiers, for Christ's sake, come on, baby.
No, but in he somehow got
the jungle.
Yeah, that's the guy, and he carried on fighting, thinking that the World War was still going on, and he surfaced out of the jungle on March the 9th, 1974. And poor sod, he still refused to surrender, and it took some persuading to tell him, you know, the war is over, you're lost. And this is what some of the SNP members are like. They just, you know, bless them, they'll carry on fighting and shouting SNP and Nicola and all of this. But it's over. The party is over. The party has gone. The party that you loved, that we loved, that we all fought for, is no more. It's as dead as the Monty Python parrots. And they need to get up and move on, or grab hold of the likes of Mike Russell and hold him to account for what he's done to their party. But don't be another Hiru and Oda and carry on fighting. It's a waste of time.
I just want to say that, shit, I'm that old when I remembered who you were talking about and what happened. It's just, I'm feeling the age here.
Poor Sod was, he held out in the Philippine jungle for 29 years. And you know, his loyalty was unwavering. And, you know, loyalty is a good thing, but blind loyalty, I mean, he wasted 29 years of his life believing in something that didn't even exist. The world had moved on. And, you know, you talked about war before, and we should be encouraging the powers that be to talk about peace. These cluster bombs, you know, they use all these euphemistic terms for these weapons. These cluster bombs, the Americans first dropped them in Afghanistan in 2001, and they spread out, and the ones that didn't explode at the time remained there, and they were like shoe boxes, bright yellow, exactly the same color that the Americans dropped food aid out. And so the kids came along, saw all these yellow boxes and started picking them up and being blown up. It's an evil, evil weapon, and it shouldn't be used. And I have to question, I know the Ukrainians are fighting heroically at the moment, but I have to question, you know, at what cost? What are they sacrificing? Because apart from their liberty and the freedom that they're fighting for, they're sacrificing their integrity. And there needs to be a voice of reason to get in there and just start talking peace. And I don't know why Scotland can't do it. Why Scotland can't be that voice. Instead, there was that revolting tweet that was put out by Nicola Sturgeon cheering because a lot of Russian soldiers had died. Well, all those soldiers, it doesn't matter whose side they're on.
Correct.
It's somebody's father, somebody's brother, somebody's son, somebody's husband, somebody's brother. You know, this is the reality of war. We should have nothing to do with it. And yet Scottish soldiers, I'm sure it won't be long before we're sending our own Scottish soldiers out to Ukraine. Because
God forbid, no, I hope not. I'll fight that the whole bloody way.
Well, it's, you know, the way the SNP is at the moment, it's been seduced by the likes of NATO. And then you've got people like Mike Russell talking this rubbish about getting back into Europe. And, you know, as I say, Hiru and Oda, wake up.
Yeah, Eva, you know, the talks are that, you know, people, I don't understand. I would understand how you can go from being an independentist to go back to voting Labour. We will not see any difference. I mean, if you can tell me a different policy difference between London Labour and London Tories, I'd like to hear it. Because there's nothing that the Tories do that seems that Keir Starmer's opposed to. So what difference will it be if we swap the English London Tories for the English London Labour Party? What difference will we see in Scotland?
We really won't see any at all, because I understand this week that Keir Starmer has made it plain that policy will be written in London for all of the regions. And in his view, Scotland is a region. It's, as Gordon Brown said, North Britain. It's no any different from that. The other grand announcement, which I think they tried to sneak under the radar, was that odious policies such as the rape clause and the two-child limit on child benefit will not be challenged by the Labour Party. They will remain government policy. And that is just, quite frankly, anathema to the likes of us. The other area where we've got a pretend battle between Tory and Labour and others is to do with decriminalisation of personal possession of drugs or possession of drugs for personal use. And this last couple of weeks has seen yet again a dreadful spectacle in Scotland whereby this scourge has been a political football. Because again, we're dealing in euphemisms, as Yvonne has alluded to, and as Lloyd said, we've got entire swathes of policy being written by people who've not consulted with those whom the policies affect the most. And the main issue for me in the context of the war against drugs is that we've known for a very long time that our difficulty in Scotland has been a lack of proper rehabilitation beds and rehabilitation facilities. People who have been lucky enough to be rehabilitated have to go home and stay in the same horrible houses and horrible circumstances that led them into drugs misuse in the first place. We know that childhood trauma and homelessness are big deals for people in those circumstances. And we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that in Scotland for decades, poverty has dictated inequality, and it's poverty that is the reason why we desperately need Scottish independence with the greatest of urgency. And when you look at Scotland's problems today in the round, you can write off whatever the Labour Party or the Tories or the Liberal Democrats or the Greens pretend that they can do for Scotland, because all of that is hot air. The Scottish votes, the Scottish voices don't matter and they don't count in Westminster, but we have to make them count for the people of Scotland. We need to address the fact that in this county, where I've spent most of my life, at least 1 in 4 children live in poverty. Yeah. Hundreds, if not thousands, of working people qualify for universal credit and they use food banks. There is substandard housing in every local authority area in Scotland, and we know that housing costs have a lot to do with poverty. People have too much money going out and not enough money coming in. We don't have the National Energy Company we were promised. We don't have a National House Building Company. We don't have a universal basic income. And we have services which are slowly beginning to crumble, whether that's the NHS or education. We've had innumerable, horrible, controversial areas of public policy in the last couple of years where we've spent too much money and too much time and embarrassed ourselves internationally by inept, stupid, unpopular decisions, proposals and plans. What Scotland needs more than ever is for the Angus Brendan McNeils and the Joanna Cherries and the Christopher McElhennys and the Alex Salmons of this world, all the people of this country who've got a spine to stand up and say enough is enough. Scotland united will never be defeated, but for as long as Scots think that they are beholden to Westminster, our people will continue to suffer unnecessarily and to suffer from shorter life expectancy, from the scourges of drug misuse, alcohol addiction, death by suicide. Our most awful, badly treated minority in Scotland now are single white men, because they are the ones that are dying mainly through drugs. They are the ones who are dying deaths as homeless. Many of them are veterans from those illegal, ill-founded, ill-advised wars that Yvonne has spoken about. Scotland needs to stand on its own 2 feet before it's too late. So I welcome Angus Brendan's position, and I hope he's joined by very many more, so that our next electoral event in Scotland can be the election for independence. And the result of that, when it's an overwhelming popular vote for independence, will lead to the negotiation of the terms of the independence settlement. And then Scotland can grab the ball and run for our lives.
Hear, 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 hear. Phil, poverty, it's absolutely right. And we know that independence can cure it. A couple of things. The Bank of England Governor and the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, what a Jeremy Hunt he is as well, are trying to blame the workers for inflation, not corporate greed, not COVID, not Brexit. It's workers' greed. Although, as I've showed last week, wages haven't risen since 2003 in real effect. So how the hell you can blame workers, I do not know. But other information that came out this week, financial information, there is a comment to that one about how real incomes fell. But Techie, have you got the one about pensions? It came out of all in the developed world, all the countries, the UK pension, which is putting pensioners into poverty. 29% of income is what the UK pension is. Poverty is rife in our pensioners, and yet we're the 6th richest nation in the world, allegedly, by GDP, but not by distribution, Phil. It just shows yet again that the UK is a busted flush.
The UK in its current form of governance and its focus on financial capitalism, the City of London and the South East is a busted flush for everyone else except the City of London and the South East. So you go to Newcastle, you go to Middlesbrough, you go to Sunderland, you go to these places in the North East, anywhere pretty much outside the South East, you will see poverty and you will see a terrible state of affairs that we've seen. But all of these things are linked. See if we touch on every one of these subjects we've talked about. We talked about FD earlier. That's been around since 1960. This works, and there's a small group of nimble nations, nimble economies like Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, Liechtenstein. You know, Scotland fits this profile, and actually getting Andy Brophy on again to talk about that's maybe not such a bad idea. You know, since he was involved in setting up the policy in that respect. Even the whole branch office from Labour, subject that we touched on, again, control from London. What's the common theme here, guys? And when Eva was talking about poverty initially, it jumped straight into my head something we talked about before. There's a brilliant podcast I watched. It was one of the Joe Rogans with a Swiss English journalist called Johan Hari on the scam that is the war on drugs. And there's a fantastic story he tells about Lady Day, Billie Holiday. Absolutely. So this the guy Anslinger, who took over Prohibition when it was in decline, and he was given the whole department. This big department was about to fold. It was about to fold because Prohibition was just about to end, and he took over the war on alcohol just before it went into decline. What did he do? He invented the term war on drugs. This is where war on terror comes from. This is where this con game comes from, people. Pay attention and check it out. It's a terrible story, this vicious, nasty, racist piece of scum that was this Harry Anslinger who generated the term the war on drugs. And it's why it doesn't work. It's not supposed to work. It's about maintaining control. So poverty, I echo everything that Eva's already articulated very well. But this is poverty. This is the Bank of England government, the Tories, the City of London, the establishment, the powers that be retaining the status quo. Financial, real incomes are down for the people, pensions are down for the people, benefits are down for the people, the quality of your education. When are we going to wake up and realise that what we've been saying all along, and enough of us know this, and enough of us not just talk about this, but do something about it, something that Lloyd talked about that famous woman. What have you done for independence this today, Lloyd? You know, what have you done to further the case for independence this day? And the answer is, we need to more than just talk about it. We need to do something about it. And it's getting that message over that real incomes are suffering. My dad gave me a piece of advice, God rest him. And he says, look, you're getting this politics. Why don't you just look out your window and see what's the state of the education? What's the state of the healthcare? What are the job prospects? What are your children going to do? And if it ain't looking up, something's wrong, boy, and you need to do something about it. And it's as simple as that. It really is. Forget all this highfalutin nonsense and theory and economic theory. Yes, you need to understand it when you're going to understand the 45 or so economic, monetary and fiscal levers to run an economy. Fair enough. But really, if you want the principle, you understand how poverty is. It's not just hurting, it's killing people. It's destroying human beings and your neighbours. And there people are too proud to talk about it. So no, we need to stand up and be counted, people, and we need to do something about it. And it's all about independence, nothing less. That's the only thing that will allow our people to escape this horror.
Correct. Independence, nothing less. Takes you back, Lloyd. Remember that one? Independence, nothing less.
I still use it to
phrase
sign
with our hand.
letters. Yeah.
But there's another thing come out this week, Lloyd, and Techie can put this up. 20%, 1 in 5 of all UK adults have been questioned and cannot afford to feed themselves, nor have the money when they've run out of food with a month still going. They don't have enough money to fill up the larder. This is the 6th richest country in the world, Lloyd. Not just in Scotland, but let's keep it in Scotland. People are going hungry. This cannot be right. Where is the money?
It's in our wind. It's in our oil. It's in our whiskey. It's in the minds and the ingenuity of our people.
It's in Panama.
Yeah. But unfortunately, they're not getting the opportunity to actually exercise all of that. Getting back to what you were saying, Roddy, about the coming election, will people in Scotland turn out for the Labour Party? The middle class will, because that's their go-to place when they're not voting for the SNP. But I'll tell you this right now, there will be a massive, massive reduction in the number of working class people who will go out and vote in the election next year unless they've got something to vote for. And the only thing that will bring them out in numbers is asking them the same question as we asked them in September 2014. Do you want to be an independent country? It has to be Scotland United. That's the only way we can maintain the engagement of the people of this country who did vote yes. That's just a straightforward fact. At the moment, take for instance, yesterday, here in my city or my town, the Port of Leith, I had some government minister, what's her name, Shirley Ann Somerville, stoating about a newly renovated flat. Was that a newly renovated flat for the literally thousands of people on the housing list in Edinburgh and Leith? No. This was another one of these virtue signalling exercises where she tells us that 1,100 void council properties in Scotland have been renovated to a high standard for Ukrainian refugees. Now, the obvious question is, when the Ukrainian refugees go back to Ukraine, what's going to happen with those houses? Are the thousands of people on the housing list going to get a chance to have them? Or will they be passed on to someone else? It crystallises the nature of this childlike government that we've got, who will do anything to be seen by who they term their elders and betters, to be virtue signalling, to play with the big boys, when the fact of the matter is they're not even at the table. They're not even at the table. But what they're doing is they're crushing the people of this country under their own heel. People read that in the paper. They saw it in the Scottish news last night and think to themselves, wait a minute, I've been on the housing list for 11 years now, nowhere near getting a house. But because I came from the Ukraine, and I say this every time, it's not about the people from the Ukraine or any other refugees from anywhere. It's not their problem. The problem is a Scottish government that doesn't recognise the thousands of people in urgent need, who have been in urgent need for years now. But suddenly, something that gets you brownie points, something that gets you headlines, then suddenly we can renovate houses for headlines. That's what we should call it, houses for headlines. That's the policy of the current Scottish government. Yeah,
it's not good. Time's beginning to beat us, Yvonne, rather. There's lots of things I want to get in. But one of the things that came up this week was MPs with second and third jobs and not concentrating in Scotland and their constituents. And of all the members of Parliament in the United Kingdom, the one who has the most amount of hours away doing other jobs is one Douglas Ross, leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party in Scotland. 3,869 hours a year doing other jobs rather than being an MSP. If you remember back, Yvonne, when Alec had he was still an MP and he was also an MSP, how they all went crazy. And our media are saying nothing about Douglas Ross. The BBC are saying nothing. No one's saying anything. How can this man or this party, the leader of the Tory party, be committed to Scotland or his constituents when he's spending 3,869 hours playing at doing something else?
Well, I suppose one way of looking at it is that while he's messing up somebody else's life, he's not doing any damage in Holyrood. But at the same time, we really have to crack down on these two jobbers. They're being paid ridiculous wages for jobs that don't exist, sitting on boardrooms, raking in money for one day a month. I mean, what possible expertise can they lend, in doing one day a month? Of course, what it's all about is access, isn't it? It's giving a perceived access, but it's something that we should crack down on, and it won't be popular because, I don't know if people like Philippa Whitford still work as a gynecologist, but there are some much needed jobs. But no, I think that we should have zero tolerance. And it's something that should be taken seriously. One job. They've got one job to do, and they're making a mess of it. As I said, there's Mary Black saying, "Oh, I don't like doing surgeries." She's just part of an insufferable bunch of wankers who are scrambling around in the back of the Narnia wardrobe.
There you go. You did it. You did it again.
What? Well, but it's true. And oh dear me, I've let everybody down again. But it's.
You just put the ratings up, love. You just
it's just focus. They keep telling people focus on the day job. Just focus on the one bloody job you were elected to do, and stop going off and raking in obscene amounts of money for doing little or nothing in other areas. It's not acceptable. And that parliamentary register where they have to put down outside earnings, it is quite eye-opening.
Well, the thing is, I don't know what the median income is now. It's around about 25,000. Last time I looked, it was like 23,649 or something. It's about 25 grand, and people have got to go by in the median income. And yet here we have MSPs on, was it 68 grand, who say they can't survive. MPs down in Westminster on 84 grand, who say, oh, it's tough to survive in 84 grand.
84 grand.
I'm in a pension, or I don't know what it is, 8 grand or something. I would have to ask management, and here I have no idea what it all gets taken away by management. Eva, the other one, going back to Reagan economics and Thatcher economics, they thought it was a great idea to outsource all our manufacturing because they could get rid of the trade unions, they could get rid of wages, they could increase profits, they could get bigger dividends, they could make more money, and we'll give it to these Chinese people and these Indian people, and what do they know? And they'll just behave when we tell them what they need to do. And now a parliamentary committee this week in London has pointed out that the power of China, because of their manufacturing strength and economic strength, are now a danger to the UK, and we have to do something about it. Well, is this, to me, this is chickens coming home to roost?
Absolutely. This outsourcing to China actually is very close to my heart, because Alva in Clackmannanshire was a mill town, and we had, I think at one stage, probably 8 woolen mills in the town, and others elsewhere in the county, including particularly in Alloa. So for hundreds of years, women and some men had worked in these woolen and textile mills, the same as in the Borders and other parts of Scotland. And eventually, particularly in the 70s and the 80s, these mills started to close because they couldn't compete with the manufacturing industries that were becoming ever more successful from China and other places. And so we've got into a set of circumstances now where throughout the whole of Scotland, there's only a handful of mills, whether woolen or textile, where there used to be literally thousands nationwide. We've still got, thankfully, the famous Harris tweet, but apart from that, there's very little left. And so the mills in my town have either been demolished or they've been renovated and converted into flats. But thousands of jobs across the country have been lost in the process. This was inevitable. This was always what was going to happen when we stopped being a country famous for its manufacturing or engineering industries, and we turned into, to an extent, providing service industries only, or being, to a great extent, a millionaire's playground. And so we see from the extension of that problems with Airbnb, holiday homes, folk in the Isles. We're going back to where we started tonight with Lloyd talking about HPMAs and rural issues that there are in the Highlands and Islands. It's almost cyclical, but what we've seen in the course of half of my lifetime is that Scottish industry has been decimated. And while that has happened, the industries that have come to replace that have only caused greater problems for the indigenous people of Scotland. And nobody's really paying any attention to that in the current political climate. So I think what we have to do in Scotland is we have to reevaluate who we are as a people, what our aims and ambitions are, what are the good things that Scotland can do, and how we can make sure that we promote Scotland and Scottish values at every opportunity. And we will not do that when we're thrilled to Westminster. We will not begin to achieve anything like our potential nationally or individually while somebody else holds the purse strings. You know, the manifesto of an independent Republic of Scotland will not include provision for Trident. It will not include provision for weapons of mass destruction. It will not include provision for a contribution towards the cost of a monarchy. I would like to think that we'll have better things to do with Balmoral and various castles and stately homes across the country than allow royals to dot up and down the road here as and when they feel like it, whether they're bringing COVID or other diseases with them or otherwise. There is an awful lot that we could do when we have power within our own hands, but we've got to do it soon. And I'll go back to, if Scotland is ever going to achieve anything like its potential and make life so much better for everybody in Scotland, we're only going to do that when we link our hands together and we say collectively, Scotland united is the only way to drive this nation forwards. Nothing else will do. Anything short of that, it's not just an apology, it's a slap in the face to everybody in Scotland who is hungry, cold, unemployed, skint, scared or scunnered. So Hamza Yousaf and Stephen Flynn, think on about what your priorities are and deliver for the people who elected you to create our independent country.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. We're running out of time. Last two questions to Phil and Lloyd. The UK in general and Scotland in particular, Phil, was known as the workshop of the world, where we made things. And of course, as I just alluded to earlier, we decided to make more profit, more dividends, cut the wages, break the unions. We went outside. The only thing we kept, we thought was worth to keep, not making steel, not making ships, not making cars. We thought weapons only. We don't want to send that out to the rest of the world because they might use them against us. They didn't mind them using ships against us or steel or anything else. But with BRICS and multipolarity coming along, it is all coming back to bite us in the bum, is it not?
It absolutely is, and we've talked about this more, and we need to talk more about it. We need to articulate this and explain it in a way that people. I mean, if people don't have the time to go into this. I mean, the good thing about Scots and certainly the viewers of this programme are they're not stupid. You know, they know the game's up. They know there's something going on. So to treat people as badly as the political parties are with this, or SNP, 2 votes, give us another mandate, sling your hook. I mean, it's pathetic. So we need to start talking and speaking the truth. So what, it's not just manufacturing. What Eva's talking about is bang on the money. In oil and gas, which is an area I've got some expertise in, we led the world. Now we're falling further and further behind. Why? We're not investing in research and development. That's what keeps you ahead of the game. Deeper, higher pressure, and more less benign waters into rougher waters. We need the technology, we need gathering systems. I specialise in subsea umbilicals, risers and flow lines for a while, which is all about gathering systems in the seabed. That's the future. It ain't pushing an oil rig into the sea what the Yanks got us to do yonks ago. And it's really, when you talk about BRICS, you know, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, plus 20 now. This is taken over, but they're taking over. This isn't nasty or surprising. We invented this. The BRICS economies will take over using industrial capitalism married with socialism. The socialism that makes people looked after and protected by the government, which is their government's job, by the way, to give affordable housing, good healthcare, good education, to make it economic for companies to hire people cheaply because their needs are taken care of by the government. That's how socialism and industrial capitalism made the West and why we've got the best society at the moment in the world. That's why people still come here. We still have our problems. But that's what Brazil and Russia and China are doing, and India. It's industrial capitalism with socialism. Not what we're doing. What we're doing is eating ourselves. It's financial capitalism. It rapes and pillages the people it purports to support. It's destroying us from within. And the military-industrial complex is just a big part of that. We know who these people are. Big pharma, military-industrial complex, hedge funds. We've said it all before. We need to go into the detail on this. And we need to bring some... If you've got an independent economy, the monetary and fiscal levers you need to control it are just one part of it. What you also need to do is make your own shit. You know, like we need a steel mill, we need a refinery, but it shouldn't be in private hands. You know, there's much more to be said for maintaining the water and the railways and the post office in the hands of the people. And this isn't communism. This is common sense. Why is it every railway in the world in Europe works a lot better than the British Rail network, and Britain's the only one that's privatised? People wake up. Let's get our act together and sort this. So no, while this game is being played and we're being betrayed by these shysters, we're not going to progress, and we're not going to protect our people and develop our children's future. And if you have any obligation, then it has got to be to the next generation and your children. If you've got children, you know that. Even if you don't, you have a moral obligation to do so. And you're failing the people of Scotland and our future and our children's future by clinging on to the apron strings of this butcher's apron. Let's get our shit together, stand up, and on your own 2 feet. Jesus, what did your mommy and your dad want for you? Get out from under their feet and away and stand your own 2 feet. And there's the pride, there's the courage, there's the power. Come on, let's do it, folks.
We pride ourselves on here, Lloyd, in telling you how it is and telling the truth and not sugarcoating it. But come on, this has been a particularly heavy-duty episode. can you leave us with any positive?
I think it's all been positive. Of course, it's all been positive. You have to be able to criticise, and more importantly than that, in real politics, you have to be able to take criticism. But smart politics is see the criticism coming and go round it. Have the answer. The problem we've got is we've got a political cadre who think history began with the alarm clock this morning. So they look at the headlines, they look at the front pages of the papers, and China's bad, Russia's bad, everything's bad. These are the very same headlines that 2 hours later, when they read something about their own party in the same newspaper, that's not true. That's them having a go at us. I've never understood these folk in the national movement who, on the one hand, scream like paranoid maniacs when something terrible is said about the SNP or any of the people in the movement by the press, but then they buy into every single story that's about bad Johnny Foreigner. It's, it's beyond my understanding. It really is. There was a thing I saw yesterday. A guy who thinks he seems to know something about the economics of Scotland in the future, instructing people in the movement that in actual fact there are people, we wouldn't be able to simplify the ideas about the European Union and single monetary policy and so on. If you can't get on a leaflet, we should just avoid talking about it. So there we have a thinker in the national movement who believes that the people of his own country are too stupid. Get out of politics, pal. It's not your game.
I would just say we're coming to the end of the show. Hoomser, pick up the phone. Pick up the phone and get it moving. And can I just say the one last thing we've been doing over the last few weeks, banks knocking back accounts. There's another one this week, and I'm just trying to look up their name now. There's a children's charity down in England, and it's called Our Kids or something. Just bear with me, folks. It's called Our Duty. It's a children's charity, and it's to assist youngsters in puberty who are having sexuality, they're struggling with it, and it's to advise them and to help them. And they've been refused a bank account by the Metro Bank because they refuse to accept that everyone has been just assigned a sex and a gender, and there's 8,742 genders last time I looked. And they've been refused a bank account for daring to believe that there's two sexes and three genders, one being neuter and the other two being male and female. And the last thing I just wanted to ask, Yvonne, your team, the Newcastle United, are coming up to play the famous Glasgow Rangers this week. Do you have a ticket?
I don't, but I know somebody who does.
Do you need a ticket?
I do. If anyone out there has a ticket,
speak to your dad. Say no more.
All right.
Rod the Prod will make a call.
But I'm really conflicted because, of course, we are the richest club in the world at the moment, thanks to 80% of the club being owned by Saudi. And it's very conflicting. And I'm a big fan also of Celtic, and I often wondered...
What?
I often wonder what Celtic would do.
I was just going to tell you, folks, Yvonne is making her final appearance tonight on Scottish Prism. She won't be back ever. I forgave her about Labour Party. I forgave her about whom they use her. But now she's just kicked the arse out. What? Get your own ticket.
Come on, Hoops.
Oh dear.
Anyway, enough of this hilarity. My darling friends, it's just been wonderful. Folks, I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. I just want to remind you, because we're leaving, we're going to put up again to remind you in air. Let's make this the biggest one yet. Let's show them. And for Believe in Scotland and for the SNP, let me tell you, this one anyone can come along. Doesn't, as long as you believe in Scottish independence, there's no code of conduct. We don't care. And even if you do believe there's 8 million genders, you're welcome. Even if you believe you don't know what a woman is or a man is, you're welcome. As long as you believe in independence, we include everyone. We don't think there's any one route. It's united, Scotland united, and the rest of it is dribble. And with that, can I thank you, my dear friends? And can I say to our viewers, I hope you've enjoyed this. Keep your comments coming, keep your questions coming, and until we see you again very, very soon, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.